As a submissive, do you find yourself constantly chasing your dominant, wondering if they're actually emotionally available? As a dominant, do you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, controlled, or even violated by your submissive? Well, stay tuned today as I discuss 15 traits of an avoidant dominant and how this style of attachment can lead to disruption and disconnection in your dynamic. New to this channel, hello and welcome. I am so glad you're here. If you enjoy this video, hit like and subscribe as it really helps this channel and community grow. And if you find this content helpful to you and your unique relationship dynamic, you can support the work that goes into this channel over at my Patreon, patreon.com/LXerotica. So we began this discussion last week with my video, 15 Traits of Toxic Submission. So if you haven't already watched that video, I suggest you do so because I lay the foundation for the material we're covering today. And as I said in that video, I have found as a general pattern that subtypes are more prone to the anxious side of the attachment spectrum, whereas dom types are more prone to the avoidant side of the attachment spectrum. This isn't always, it's never all, but this is often where issues begin to surface as both parties begin to subconsciously trigger the other's attachment wounds until disconnection is inevitable. But as I said last week, the good news is your dynamic does not have to experience this demise. And just as we brought insight and clarity to subtypes last week, I want to do the same for you dom types in my community as we begin with awareness of what your current avoidant triggers and subsequent actions may be. And I want to stop and encourage you dominants. Just as I said last week, this is not about guilt, shame, or a character assassination. If you as a dom or even subtype identify with some of these traits as we go through this list today, no one is judging or condemning you. We simply need to know where we currently are if we want to move into something else. Awareness is always the first phase of growth, and that's all we're doing today, bringing awareness to your situation so that you and your partner can create a strategy for positive change. So with that being said, the following traits will manifest if you have an avoidant attachment style driving you subconsciously. So take note of any of these traits you identify with and how they may be impacting your relationship, starting with being highly independent and self-reliant. Now there's nothing wrong with being independent and taking care of yourself. But dom types who lead avoidant will be hyper independent and have a lone wolf mentality where they feel they don't need anyone and can do it all alone, which is a trauma response, not healthy attachment. And because avoidant dominants are so self-reliant, they often struggle to ask others, especially their submissive, for help. Instead, they may unintentionally exhaust themselves or become highly aggressive and snippy the more overworked and overwhelmed they are. An avoidant dominant may also avoid emotional vulnerability in conversation, have poor communication skills, or avoid communication with their submissive altogether, even to the extent of ignored calls, texts, or even ghosting. And because these skills were not modeled to the avoidant dominant in their formative years, many dom types who identify with an avoidant attachment may additionally struggle to emotionally support or empathize with their partner or submissive, which is often interpreted as emotionally unavailable or even sociopathic. Often, a large facet of the avoidant dominant's inability to emotionally support their submissive or partner includes a struggle with giving praise or compliments, where these types of intimate, present statements are simply not on the avoidant dominant's radar, which can feel very hurtful or discouraging to a subtype, especially if they lean anxious, as we discussed last week. Now, the avoidant dom type will also likely have relatively low levels of emotional expression with themselves, others, and events, which can be especially confusing and triggering for the submissive, again, especially if they lean anxious. Because the avoidant dominant has low levels of emotional expression, They also tend to have relatively low levels of relational maintenance or connection, simply because their needs within a relationship are so incredibly low due to their superior ability to be independent and meet their own needs. This can also manifest in low levels of physical affection or sexual intimacy, where the dominant either avoids affection or intimacy altogether, defaults to porn instead of a partner, or uses structured scenes to obtain sexual pleasure without vulnerability or emotional connection. The avoidant dominant does so because they typically want to avoid deep levels of self-disclosure or intimacy, as we often call it. They don't want to be fully revealed to another and fully known by another because the concept is so foreign and even scary to those with avoidant attachment. Independence feels safe. Connection feels scary. And because connection can feel so scary to an avoidant dom type, they can often label themselves as poly, ENM, own multiple subs at once, or will even move through relationships or submissives rather quickly. Any mention of or push for something long-term will even be likely very triggering. And this is often the case because the avoidant dominant's personal goals are typically at a much higher priority level to them versus an intimate relationship with their submissive. This doesn't necessarily mean they don't want an intimate relationship, but their personal goals can't betray them. Therefore, personal goals feel safer to them than a relationship with another person with full autonomy who can betray or worse, control them. And because control or a loss of their autonomy is so triggering to an avoidant dom type, they often pull away very strongly from any real, perceived, or imagined conflict and may even stonewall versus staying present and calmly navigating a conflict. In fact, stonewalling and ghosting are common tools of avoidant types, and you will find that a triggered avoidant dom type will often completely withdraw when they feel hurt, angry, misunderstood, or otherwise triggered. But despite their emotional turmoil, avoidant dominants are often perceived as arrogant, aloof, or even uncaring by others or their submissive due to their level of privacy and autonomy. Because what makes these dominants seem so powerful is they typically do not care how they are perceived by others, which serves as a protective barrier from vulnerability and intimacy. Let's have a chat. Could you relate to any of these points? If so, how many of these traits did you identify with, dominance? And most importantly, if you could choose to focus on improving just one of these traits, which one of them would have the most impact on your dynamic? Comment below and let me know. And be sure your notifications are turned on because next week I'm giving you a practical action plan to move into secure attachment regardless of where you currently are on the attachment spectrum.